There are often subtle signs that indicate an elderly person may be entering the final stage of life, yet many people fail to recognize them until much later. In this video, I will explain some of the most common signs and share what seniors and their loved ones should know about this stage of aging. This is also a topic many people tend to avoid until they are personally faced with it. In movies, the decline toward the end of life is usually sudden and dramatic. In reality, though, it is often much more gradual and quiet. Families may only notice the pattern afterward, looking back and realizing that small changes were actually the beginning of a larger decline. After more than 30 years working as a nurse and caring for elderly patients near the end of life, I have learned that the body often shows gentle warning signs long before people fully understand what is happening. This video is not meant to predict exactly how long someone has left to live, because no one can know that with certainty. And having some of these symptoms does not automatically mean a person is near the end. However, these are common patterns that healthcare professionals and families frequently observe during the later stages of aging and physical decline. So, let's go through them together. The first sign is increased sleep and fatigue. One of the most common things families notice is that an elderly person begins sleeping far more than usual. This goes beyond an occasional afternoon nap. It may involve spending most of the day resting, having very low energy, staying in bed or seated for long periods, and struggling with activities that once felt simple. Often, this change happens slowly over time. As the body ages, it becomes less efficient, and even routine tasks can require much more effort and energy. Of course, fatigue can also come from treatable conditions such as anemia, medication reactions, infections, or depression, so it should never be dismissed. Still, a steady increase in exhaustion is frequently seen during the later stages of life. The second sign is a reduced appetite and gradual weight loss. Many families notice their loved one no longer seems interested in eating. This can be especially difficult emotionally because providing food is closely tied to love and care. However, as the body slows down, appetite often naturally decreases. Older adults may eat smaller portions, skip meals, lose weight, or simply say they are not hungry anymore. And despite good intentions, repeatedly telling someone to eat more rarely changes the situation. Gradual appetite loss is extremely common near the end of life, although sudden or severe weight loss should always be medically evaluated. The third sign is increasing weakness and more frequent falls. Many seniors begin to appear less steady on their feet. They may move more slowly, struggle with balance, or experience repeated falls. Families often assume this is simply part of aging, and while aging does contribute, repeated falls can also point to muscle loss, frailty, illness progression, cognitive decline, or overall physical weakening. Falls often become a major turning point later in life. Even when older adults recover from hospitalization or injury, they may never fully regain the same level of independence they once had. The fourth sign is repeated hospital visits. Healthcare workers often recognize a concerning pattern when an elderly person begins moving repeatedly between the emergency room, hospital stays, rehabilitation, home, and back to the hospital again. Families frequently describe it by saying their loved one never seems to fully recover anymore. That's because the body gradually loses resilience, and each illness or hospitalization becomes harder to bounce back from. The fifth sign is withdrawal and loss of interest. This change can be very subtle. Older adults may begin socializing less, lose interest in hobbies, speak less often, or spend more time alone and inwardly focused. Loved ones sometimes mistake this for depression, stubbornness, or giving up, but it can also reflect a gradual decline in physical energy, mental sharpness, and overall stamina. In many cases, elderly people simply become more selective about how they use the limited energy they still have. The sixth sign is confusion or cognitive changes. Changes in memory and thinking may become more noticeable over time. A person may seem forgetful, disoriented, mentally slower, or increasingly confused. It's important to remember that sudden confusion should never be ignored, since it can signal serious medical issues like infections, dehydration, medication problems, or even a stroke. However, a slow decline in memory and awareness is something many families observe during the final years of life. The seventh sign is a gradual overall decline that families slowly recognize. This final sign is difficult to describe, but families often recognize it when looking back. It's the feeling that their loved one simply no longer seems quite like themselves. They may move more slowly, recover less easily, participate less in conversation or activities, or appear physically smaller and more fragile. There may not be one dramatic moment, just a quiet and steady decline over time. And emotionally, this can be one of the hardest parts for families because the transition is often gradual rather than sudden.